Good morning. So we are continuing the lesson Physiology and Sports. In previous video we have discussed about gender differences. So now we will study about the physiological factors determine the components of physical fitness. So first of all, components of physical fitness. So there are 5 components of physical fitness are there, which we have studied in class 11 also. Strength, speed, endurance, flexibility, and coordinative ability. So these 5 components of the fitness and their parts and detail we have studied in class 11, and some of the detail about these components we will study in the chapter training in sports. So here we are discussing about the physiological factors determine the components of physical fitness. So physiological factors determining speed, the strength. So strength is decided by the muscle size. As we know, the muscles always work in a group. Single muscle never work. Muscles always work in a group, and sometimes more than one muscle groups are working together to execute any action or any movement. So the strength of muscle depends on the size of muscles, because force produced by same size of muscles in male and female is approximately same and can be improved through training. So muscle size can be increased by various exercises. So that is also known as the cross sectional area, because muscles can be developed, muscles can be enlarged by doing exercise. The size of muscles can be increased by various exercise or physical activity. So it can be improved through the training, because higher muscle size will produce higher strength. Body weight, individual who are heavier are stronger than the lightweight individuals, because body weight also helps to increase the strength. Most of the activity, the body weight and the strength work in same direction. So that's why body weight helps to increase the strength of individual. Muscle composition. Muscular system is composed of white muscles and red muscle fibers. The percentage of these muscles is genetically determined and cannot be changed through training. So muscle group is composed by white muscle fibers and red muscle fibers, and these muscle fibers are genetically determined. We cannot change through the exercise or training. So the white muscle fibers and red muscle fibers, the difference is there. Then white muscle fibers contract quickly, so that's why they are known as fast twist muscle fiber. Red muscle fibers twist slowly but for longer duration, that's why they are known as red muscle fiber. They have more blood vessels, that's why their color is red, so that's why they are known as red muscle fiber. White muscle fibers are considered good for strength. They produce strength quickly. Red muscle fibers, they can produce the strength slowly but for longer duration. So percentage of these muscle fibers also decide the strength. White muscle fibers we will study in next slide. I will tell you what are the white muscle fibers, what are the red muscle fibers. Nerve impulse. Speed of nerve impulse determine the strength. Cannot be improved through the training. Nerve impulse means how quickly the nerves are sending message to the brain and how quickly they are receiving the message and following it at the site of the body. So carrying message quickly and bringing message quickly from the brain, this is the work of nerves. So the impulse, the rate of the sending and receiving the message also helps to produce the good strength, because while the muscles are contracting they are producing strength, so that message is sent from the brain and specific chemicals are released when the contraction of the muscles takes place. So that's why the nerve impulse is very important for the good strength. I was telling you about the red muscle fibers and white muscle fibers. So red muscle fibers we can see here. What are the red muscle fibers? Red muscle fibers are known as the slow twitch muscle fibers. Slow twitch muscle fibers are fatigue resistance, focused on sustain and smaller movement, because they contract slowly. They contain more mitochondria and are aerobic in nature. They contract slowly, that's why slow twitched muscle fibers. Another name of the red muscle fiber is slow twitched muscle fibers. Slow twitched muscle fibers are also sometimes called red muscle fibers because of their blood supply. Slow twitched muscle fibers contract slowly and produce less force. So again see there, slow twitch muscle fibers are fatigue resistance, focused on sustain and smaller movement. They contain more mitochondria and are aerobic in nature. Slow twitch muscle fibers are also sometimes called red muscle fibers because of their blood supply. As I was telling you, more blood capillaries are there, that's why the color is red. So that's why they are known as red muscle fiber. These red muscle fibers contract slowly and produce less force. Whereas white muscle fibers, these are the fast twitched muscle fibers. Fast twitched muscle fibers provide bigger and more powerful pulse, but for shorter duration and fatigue quickly. So while we are talking about the force or strength, so these white muscle fibers provide bigger and more powerful force. They are more anaerobic with less blood supply, hence they are sometimes referred as white muscle fibers. Less blood supply, so then the color of muscle fiber is white. That's why they are known as white muscle fiber. fast twitch muscle fibers or white muscle fibers contract quickly and produce maximum force. So when we are talking about the strength, so white muscle fibers, percentage of white muscle fibers is more, so there will be more strength. Physiological factors determining speed. Mobility of nervous system. Contraction and relaxation of muscles is controlled by the nervous system, as I was discussing in previous slide. So nerves send messages to the brain and brain respond them, and the contraction and relaxation takes place. Frequency of contraction and relaxation of muscles is determined by the excitability of nerve impulse, how quickly the message is transferred. So that mobility of nervous system or nerve impulse that we have discussed in previous slide also, that decide the speed, because how quickly the nerves are passing message and receiving message will determine the speed, because speed in activities, especially in physical activities, speed for microsecond also determine. It decides the winners and losers. So that quick nerve impulse and quick mobility of nervous system is very important. Muscle composition. Percentage of white muscle fibers and red muscle fiber is genetically determined and cannot be changed through training. This also affect this is the factor which decides about the speed. As we have discussed in previous slide, that white muscle fibers, they contract quickly, red muscle fibers, they contract slowly. So speed, quickly, if we need the quick speed, so white muscle fibers are very responsible because they generate speed quickly. So percentage of white muscle fibers is higher, so speed will be higher. Explosive strength. Explosive strength is the combination of speed and strength. This also decides the speed. Some of the activity, most of the activity in sports, then speed and strength needed together. So explosive strength depends on muscles composition, muscle size, muscle coordination and metabolic process. Muscle composition, we understand composition of the muscles, white muscle fiber and red muscle fiber. Muscle size, muscles coordination, how the muscles are coordinating to each other. The group of muscles, I have told you, sometimes two group of muscles or more group of muscles are working together for particular movement, particular action. So coordination, muscle coordination and metabolic process. Except muscle composition, the other factor can be improved through the training. Muscle composition cannot be changed through the training or activities, physical activities, but muscle size, muscle coordination and metabolic process can be improved. So explosive strength is also the factor which decides about the speed of the individual, because explosive strength is the combination of speed and strength both. Next is physiological factors determining speed is flexibility. Maximum range of movement of any muscles or joint is known as the flexibility. the range of movement of any muscles or joint. Freedom of movement enable muscles to move at faster rate. We know then if the movement is in larger range and the joints are freely moving or muscles are freely moving, so that will definitely increase the rate of movement. So that condition, the movement enables the muscles to move at faster rate and complete utilization of explosive strength. Explosive strength can be completely utilized. It is combination of the speed and strength. So flexibility is rather very important, that we can understand if the muscle and joints are rigid, we are unable to bend quickly, so definitely the speed will be low. If the flexibility is good, so then the joints and the muscles are moving freely, so then the speed will be good. So flexibility is the another factor which determine the speed. Biochemical reserve and metabolic power. Biochemical reserve and metabolic power we will discuss here. For maximum speed performance, the muscles require more amount of energy at a very high rate of consumption, because speed activities need maximum energy and consumption of energy is also higher. So for this purpose, ATP and CP stores should be enough. ATP we know, adenosine triphosphate, this is stored in mitochondria, and mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the body, which supply the energy molecules for any activity, any kind of activity. So this we have studied in biology also, then mitochondria is the powerhouse which stores ATP molecules, adenosine triphosphate molecule, which are used to provide energy for any activity, for any action. Then these ATP molecules are converted into the ADP, and then again ADP molecules are going to be to the mitochondria for gaining one molecule of phosphate and again converted into the ATP and stored in the mitochondria. So mitochondria keep the energy molecules in the form of ATP molecules. So ATP and CP, creatine phosphate. CP is the creatine phosphate. This is the instant energy available at the muscles. Muscles use CP for instant energy. Quickly it is needed for the movement. So it is stored in the muscle cells, creatine phosphate. ATP is adenosine triphosphate and CP is the creatine phosphate. Creatine phosphate is the quick form of energy which is available at the site of the muscles. And this is the instant energy which is used by the muscles for any movement. So for this purpose, ATP and CP stores should be enough. If the store is less, the muscle contraction due to insufficient energy supply becomes slow after a short time. So if we do not have sufficient energy in energy stores, so definitely the muscles contraction will be slow down and it will affect the speed of individual. So physiologically the energy production and energy stores should be fully loaded. So this also is a factor which determine the speed of individual. There should be sufficient number of ATP molecules stored in mitochondria. There should be sufficient number of mitochondria with the cells, and there should be CP, creatine phosphate, readily available for utilization. in the form of energy. Physiological factors determine endurance. Physiological factors determine endurance. First is aerobic capacity. Aerobic capacity, the energy required by the muscles can be supplied in the presence of oxygen. Hence, supply of oxygen to working muscle is important for endurance performance. Endurance is the activity, if we know, the endurance is sustaining the activity, any activity for certain time duration. Whatever activity we are doing, we should able to continue that activity for longer time or for certain specific time. So that is known as the endurance. So aerobic capacity is energy required by the muscles can be supplied in the presence of oxygen. Hence, supply of oxygen to working muscle is important for endurance performance. Aerobic capacity, we can understand, it depends upon the oxygen intake. It depends upon the oxygen transport. It depends upon oxygen uptake. It depends upon the energy reserve. So oxygen intake, how much we are inhaling the oxygen, that is the source of the oxygen inhalation, respiratory system, how much oxygen we are inhaling. But during some of the activity, like the fast activity, if you are running fast, so definitely there is the short breathing is there, so that's why we are unable to inhale sufficient amount of oxygen. So oxygen intake can be improved through training. So intake of oxygen we can increase. It can be improved through the training or various physical activities. Oxygen transportation of oxygen to the target cell for producing the energy, because when oxygen oxidize the glucose molecule, then it will produce the energy. So oxygen transport should be very good, and this can be improved through the training. This can also be improved through the training. How the oxygen is being transported to each and every cell properly and quickly. Oxygen uptake, this is how the cells are receiving the oxygen quickly. They are receiving the oxygen properly or not, so can be also improved through the training. Energy reserves that we have discussed, mitochondria, CP, creatine phosphate. So energy reserve, the mitochondria will be fully loaded, and number of mitochondria should be more in the cells. So that will be can be improved through the training. So first factor of the physiological factor which determine the endurance is aerobic capacity, and aerobic capacity is oxygen intake, oxygen transport, oxygen uptake, and energy reserves, which all can be improved through the training. Second is lactic acid tolerance. Lactic acid tolerance, it is the important for activities lasting more than 40 seconds and determine anaerobic capacity. Can be improved through training. So all those activities where activities are lasting more than after more than 40 seconds, so anaerobic capacity can be determined here. And lactic acid tolerance, I can tell you, whenever we are doing any work, the muscles are doing work, contraction and relaxation of the muscle is there when we are doing any work or any movement. So that time, gradually when the muscles get tired, quickly the message goes to the brain that muscles are getting tired. So brain send message to release chemical at the site of the muscles. Understand it very clearly. Again, while we are doing any work, some muscle contraction and relaxation takes place. For doing any work, any action, any movement, the particular muscles are contracting and relaxing. In that time, when muscles are frequently contracting and relaxing, that time, if the activity is for longer duration, so muscle feel tiring. They feel the tiredness. So when they feel tiredness, that message is sent by the nerves to the brain that muscles are feeling tiredness or they are going to be tired. So kindly stop the activity. So brain will send message to the specific part, that particular part, to stop the activity. So in form of brain will send message to the nerves that release certain chemicals that site. So that is lactic acid is released at the site of the muscles. Lactic acid makes the muscles harder and it get deposited into the muscles to make them harder. So when muscles will become harder, so then the contraction relaxation process will be gradually slow down and the muscles will stop contracting and relaxing. So this is lactic acid, the role of lactic acid. And lactic acid tolerance is there when the brain is sending message to release the chemical. The lactic acid is released in a small amount. Initially it is released in a small amount, then gradually it increases. But when the muscles are tolerating that amount, initial amount of the lactic acid, whatever the small amount at the site of the muscle is released, that is tolerated by the muscles and muscles are continuously working. That is known as lactic acid tolerance. If the muscles are able to tolerate that small amount of lactic acid which is being released at the site of the muscle, so they can work for certain longer time. If lactic acid tolerance is poor, so then initially when the brain has sent the message to release small amount of lactic acid, so quickly the muscles will get tired and they will stop working. So lactic acid should be tolerated by the muscles properly, because the brain send message to release lactic acid at the site of the muscle. So the special chemical message is sent and that starts secreting little amount of lactic acid at the site of the muscle. So that can be tolerated, that must be tolerated by the muscle for doing work continuously. If the muscles are able to tolerate it, so they can work for longer duration. If muscles are unable to tolerate it, so they will stop working immediately. So this is known as the lactic acid tolerance. So it also decides the endurance. Movement economy. For apex performance, body movement should be economical. Good techniques save energy and improve endurance. Movement should be economic, which will help us to save energy and save time. So technical things are used now, technology is used, technical movements can be learned. So technical skills should be improved for learning the movement economy. So movement economy will help us to save energy and work for longer duration. Muscles composition, again the percentage of white muscle fibers and red muscle fibers is genetically determined and cannot be changed through training. This also affect the endurance definitely.